Politics. I am Dante Klink. Atty. Estrada, what will the next government, specifically VP Sara Duterte Carpio, what will she inherit from the previous administration?
Well, there are top issues, I think, that should be prioritized. Number one is the learning losses brought about by the pandemic. As we all know, education had to be delivered through online platforms. According to the NEDA, it's citing a US study, it's only effective, 52% as effective compared to traditional face-to-face and modular platforms, around 37% only. So you can see there the learning losses for our students. And not only that, even prior to the pandemic, we've heard about non-readers, grade 7 non-readers, and so on, especially in the public school system.
Yeah, this I think was the reflection in the PISA results.
Right. So that's number one, the learning losses, and then of course you have to look into the support to teachers, problems with teachers, both public and private, and then access has been a problem for a long time. Needing more schools and reaching out to out of school youth. Yeah. So those are a few. And then if you want to go into details, of course, the K-12 is due for revisiting and reevaluation. I think we'll have the first batch of graduates of the full K-12 program by next year, by the end of school year 23-24.
That's interesting to point out because as we know, the 18th Congress ended. And before it did, there was a bicameral resolution that was passed calling for EdCom 2.
Right.
But this is part of the K-12 review as well. But what should be reviewed? What should be on the agenda?
It's about time that we look into not only the institutional issues. I think during the first few years of K-12, we were looking at number of teachers, shortages in classrooms, etc. But I think now we're looking into the quality of education that is being delivered under the K-12 program. So I think the review should focus on that more, and not really on going back to the 10-year program, because there's no going.
So it's refining the 12-year program.
Right. So and how we can strengthen it. I think moving forward and looking at the gains from the first 12 years, we'll have the first batch of graduates of K-12 next year. Right.
Senator Sherwin Gatchalian made the public statement saying that the K-12 failed in preparing our high school graduates for employment. In fact, he was mentioning specifically the job mismatch, that K-12 did not address that. Is that a legitimate issue to look at? I mean, given the fact that there's so much innovation going on, I think the argument I heard is that how do you decide what to teach students today if you don't even know what careers would be existing or will be in demand in the future? But is a job mismatch issue a legitimate agenda item in EdCom 2?
Certainly, it's a legitimate agenda, but it cannot really solve that just based on K-12.
Right.
The K-12 just provides a framework. It's a law, but a lot of factors are going on. I think we need to encourage more industries to join and design curricula and absorb students in training. So we'll have more participation from the industries. There has to be some incentive also on their part, and of course, it addresses the entire education cycle, not just basic education. So the higher education should also connect very well with the K-12 program. So I think these are the things we should look into.
You seem to be implying, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, that the private sector needs to invest, but you're saying that this might be sweetened by some incentives. People forget that these are businesses after all, right? And as you said, some of them have gone under during the pandemic. So what are those incentives that would entice more private schools to spend more in their facilities, systems, and salaries for teachers in particular?
Yeah, I think we need to explore more partnerships with industries.
Okay.
Meaning schools partnering with industry so that the industries have an active role in designing curriculum, and then graduates would have a sure way of getting employment after. But the industries also should get something in return, right? So because they'll be investing on the schools. I think before we had this Adopt a School program, but has not been very effective in encouraging the industries to come in. So I think those are the things that we need to look into moving forward.
Yeah, so they really have to rely on their own, and their only means of doing this, of course, is charging tuition. But I think this goes to your point earlier that one of the problems is the process of increasing tuition. But maybe you can elaborate more.
Yeah, I think that's whenever we hear something about tuition and tuition increase, and we have that mindset that this is about profiting of schools, right?
But subsidizing private companies,
right? But it's actually, the increase in tuition. It's number one. It's there's some self-regulation there. You cannot just increase tuition, otherwise you may lose more enrollment, right? And
they'll go to public.
They go to public, or they'll stop sending their kids to school. That's number one. And then, of course, the government also has already put in place regulation, and if I may say, it's over-regulated, right? The incremental proceeds realized from the tuition increases goes to 70% goes to salaries of faculty and school personnel. You cannot spend it in either other items, and then 20% goes to facilities. So if you have you only have a 10% margin for profit, but even then, I don't think 1 year of increase in tuition would fund your expansion and improvement of facilities. So I think we should look into that and be concerned about sustainability of schools, and not just looking into how much the tuition is being charged. We need to look at the real value of education, so that we also recognize its importance.
I think this is part of the problem, because I think many of our policymakers and lawmakers are products of Ateneo, De La Salle, and the USTs, and of course UP, which is a state school. But they forget that's not those are really the exception. And then many of these institutions really lack the means. In fact, one of the problems I've heard, and maybe you can elaborate on this, that private schools sometimes have suffered from well-meant policies, such as the moves to increase the salaries of teachers. Of course, when that is discussed, they're only referring to the teachers in the public school system,
right?
And not the private schools. And you guys have to fend for yourselves and trying to find the money.
Right. Whenever we talk about teacher support, there should be no dichotomy in teacher support. It should apply to both public and private public school teachers, in as much as the private school teachers. And actually, the private school teachers are more marginalized in the aspect of compensation, because there's a social context in tuition, right? So we cannot just raise salaries and raise tuition.
Right.
We have to consider the parents also. So there's a certain level of salaries that we can only pay our teachers.
That money has to come from somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why in the past we've been proposing for government to subsidize more portion of the salaries of the private school teachers. Right now, the gap in salaries between the public and the private, it's around average 10,000. Just basic entry level teachers.
Entry level? No?
Right, entry level teachers. So, and the gap is widening. So you see a lot of teachers moving from private to the public, or just changing careers altogether.
But to be clear, COCOPEA is not against increasing the salary of teachers. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, of course. We want to compensate.
You just want to have your teachers included in the program that will benefit the salary of teachers.
Right, because I think there's no other way. If we really want to elevate their compensation to a certain level, without increasing or without passing the cost to the parents.
Right.
So government appropriation.
But you're the lawyer. How can that be legally done without the government being criticized for essentially bankrolling private businesses?
Well, the principle has always been government money shall be used for public purposes.
Okay.
And when we talk about education, certainly this is public, right?
Okay.
So this can be supported by appropriation. As we've seen, a lot of laws are passed and funded by Congress, which have private component or supporting private initiatives. So I think there would be no problem if we adopt the same, apply
Right.
the same to education, because education is public.
Right. Senator Gatchalian, again, I'll mention him, mentioned that in terms of salaries, our rate is about in the bottom third in ASEAN. Is that consistent with what you've been hearing? And is there anything that you've seen elsewhere in other countries that maybe could be copied here to help both private and public and private?
Yeah, we can learn from a lot of practices from our neighbors internationally in terms of supporting our teachers. Number one, teachers are professionals. Just comparing our teachers now with our other professions, right? Like, well, lawyers, engineers, and other professions, parang they're really left behind, right? So we really need to rally behind our teachers, and again, not only the public school teachers, but including the private school teachers. I think there's also now we're starting to feel that we lack enough teachers to teach in our school, teaching around 27 to 30 million students, and not
Right.
only teachers, right? Guidance counselors,
Right. The whole staff.
right.
I'd like to ask you more about some of these. We're finding some of these policies, particularly tuition. But before that, we'd like to take a break. We'll be back in a few minutes. This is Business and Politics. We'll be back.